Hi, this is Dan Sullivan. I'd like to welcome you to the Multiplier Mindset Podcast. One of the things in working with Peter Diamandis, the topic, which is a very controversial topic around the world, as many new things are, is a thing called GMO, which stands for genetically modified organisms. You know, it's made out by the people who pose it to be some scary new thing, but in fact almost everything on the planet around us that's living, whether it's plant life or animal life, is genetically modified. Okay, and by that I mean that choices have been made, or there's a natural evolutionary process at work which identifies strongest characteristics, and over generations of any organism there's a genetic modification of that person. And so just a few things that I find very, very interesting. For example, that a couple hundred years ago, when you read history, you read, in our part of the world, the two main histories that we really read about most are British history and American history. And North America is sort of a product of the British Empire. Probably around 1800, the average height of people was about 5'5", 5'6", and they weighed maybe 130, 140 pounds. And that was in Britain. Americans were bigger because right from the beginning, Americans had more protein. There was plentiful animal protein as soon as they got here. So Americans really grew faster than anyone else. They were genetically modified by having a much higher level of protein, easy to get protein, when they got to the New World, far more than Europeans. We've actually increased, since 1800, the human race has increased in mass, overall mass. That would be the combination of height and weight. We've increased by 40 to 50% over who people were in the 1800s, early 1800s. Well, that's genetic modification, and plant breeding is all based on choosing this characteristic and screening out that characteristic. Same way with animals. You go to a park where they walk dogs and you'll see the most amazing different shapes and breeds of dogs there, but you have to realize that every single dog on the planet came from the same wolf genetically, and they can trace this back 10,000 years ago to a crossover wolf who for some reason crossed over and decided that it made more sense to work with human beings rather than to fight against them. So if you think of a Great Dane on the one hand and you think of a Chihuahua on the other hand, they come from the same genetic line. They're genetically modified. So when people have this problem with genetic modification, I said, well, you don't even recognize who you are. And I've got a story about that. So my mother, I took her to Italy when she was 75. She had never been to Europe, and I gave her a trip to Venice and Florence and Rome, and we went to the island of Capri. We had a lot of time to chat, and I said, why'd you choose Dad for your husband? What was that all about? And she said, well, my family was sickly, and Dad was a farmer, and he was very strong. She said, I wanted the children to be strong, and I didn't know if I could pass on that strength, but I knew he could. And it's true, because I'm one of 7, and there's still 6 of us alive. We're all in our 60s, 70s, and 80s, and all of us are healthy and fit and very, very strong. So she succeeded. So my mother really, in the truest sense of the word, actually genetically modified us. Or she performed genetic modification in order to make sure she wanted children, but she was afraid that she would pass on a lot of the weaknesses. There was tuberculosis in her family, and an aunt died of tuberculosis, and there were various other ailments, but my father was very, very strong, very, very healthy, and she wanted his genes. So there was a great deal of strategy, and I asked her, because my father just mostly worked. worked outside. He was a farmer. He was a landscaper. And I said, well, what about parenting? Did you think about parenting? And she said, well, and I grew up Catholic. My whole family grew up Catholic. And she said, no, that's what the Catholic Church was for, and that's what the Catholic school system, they would give the parenting. But I wanted the muscle and I wanted the strength. I sat there and I was really struck by the long-term strategy of my mother. And I was sitting there and I said, wow, that's really a clever bit of thinking on her part. She wanted a lot of children, but she wanted them strong. And so my mother saw to it that we were genetically modified by the husband she chose to be the father. When you see people that have made all kinds of life decisions, in other words, they're in their 60s or 70s, and you begin to wonder why certain things were done or how certain things developed in a marriage or in a particular family, or how people conducted themselves in their careers, you begin to realize that at every age people are really intelligent, and probably people a long time ago, and I go back thousands of years ago, were just as intelligent in relationship to their environment and in relationship to their resources as anyone is right now. And this is my mother in 1935 thinking about the future. So she was thinking in a very, very strategic way, taking a lot of different information, a lot of different aspects, past of her family, the present of this really strong man that she had met, and the future she wanted with her children. I just admire it. I just admire intelligence and thinking things through and planning in whatever form, in whatever situation, and in whatever age. The thing that I would like you to consider, that all of your long-range thinking about how you would like things in the future are really good for you. And ask yourself, and I use a 25-year question, if I could get really, really clear, and you can get really clear of what kind of measuring sticks you would like to see yourself 25 years down the road, and you get real clear about the measurements, then just work backwards to the actions, the decisions, and the communications that you have to undertake in the short range so that you get the result that you're looking for long range.